another 42 captives were brought up to the deck and thrown overboard. What made this second round even harder to justify was what was happening while it was going on. Rain fell heavily and replenished the ship's freshwater supply. The crew had even collected enough rainwater to significantly extend their drinking water, and the crisis they had feared had eased, yet for some reason the killings didn't stop. After the rain had refilled their supply, the crew still threw more into the ocean as 36 additional men were forced into the water over the next several days. Their deaths, like the others, were later cited by officers as part of the overall loss of cargo and were included in the coming insurance claim. In one case, a man who had been thrown overboard managed to climb back onto the ship, making it clear that many of those thrown overboard weren't sick or incapacitated. Not that it would have made any of this any better. By the time the Zong continued its course toward Jamaica, 142 people had been thrown overboard, and throughout the last two sequences of killings, the ship had plenty of water. This fact doesn't justify the first round, but it would go on to show that the decision wasn't fueled by any real threat to the ship's safety or to those aboard. The Zong finally reached Black River, Jamaica on December 22, 1781. After months at sea and weeks of turmoil, the ship carried only 208 surviving captives, which was less than half the number who boarded. The crew offered explanations for the drop in numbers and blamed it on sickness and a lack of supplies, even though the ship arrived with a significant amount of drinking water still on board. Then, 3 days after reaching Jamaica, Luke died from the illness. His death came before any official inquiry, and whatever he might have said about the voyage or the decisions made by his crew died with him. After the ship reached port, the surviving captives were sold in early January. Market prices at the time meant that each individual sold at an average price that would have been considered a successful profit. For the Liverpool merchants, the financial losses came from the people who never made it to market, and those are the ones they planned to claim through insurance. When the Zong's officers returned to Britain, that's exactly what the Liverpool group did. They argued that the killings were a necessary part of preserving the ship's cargo and that the insurers were obligated to compensate them for it, but the insurers rejected the request immediately. They didn't accept the explanation that they were unavoidable or that the ship had been in genuine danger. From their perspective, the officers had made a serious navigational mistake and mishandled the voyage before simply slaughtering many of the cargo for an easy payout. So in response, the Liverpool owners pushed the matter to court. The case got underway in London on March 6, 1783, and the presiding judge was Lord Mansfield, a well-known figure in British law. He had previously ruled on cases related to slavery, including a decision that suggested it had no basis in English law. Unfortunately, that earlier ruling didn't necessarily translate into broad protection for captives though, and so it didn't play much of a role as the trial unfolded. The courtroom was instead entirely focused on the insurance dispute. The legal framework was much like that of the insurance industry of the time and viewed them as property, not people, so the trial followed along similar lines. Robert was the only witness called, and he described the voyage in a way that supported the owner's claims. And with no logbook, as the Zongs had mysteriously vanished, and no contradictory testimony, Robert's version of events went unchallenged. Under the insurance principles accepted at the time, a crew could get rid of cargo if doing so was necessary to save a ship. At the trial's conclusion, the jury ultimately agreed that the insurers were responsible for covering the loss. The case might have ended there, but something happened just days later that pushed the story into a wider public view. A former captive who had become a British abolitionist writer and speaker named Olaudah Equiano heard about the trial. He then immediately got in touch with his friend Granville Sharp, who was a leading activist in the anti-slavery movement. Granville had connections within the media and shared the story of the Zong with them. Newspapers then picked up the story and published lengthy accounts describing what had happened. For many readers, this was the first time they had heard of such violence carried out on captive ships by a British crew, and the idea that the ship's owners might profit from the killings only fueled greater outrage. And disturbed by both the killings and the treatment of the captives aboard the Zong, Granville sought advice about whether the crew could be prosecuted for murder.